and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverend, Faith and Current Affairs.
Welcome along to this week's episode of Irreverend, Faith and Current Affairs. I'm joined by the two recalcitrant Revs, Thomas Pelham and Daniel French. We've got a lot coming up in this show. We're going to be talking about the crazy world that we're living in at the moment and all the things that are going on. But first, Tom, I must ask you, where have those red chairs come from in the background? No, how are you doing today?
Oh, there are red chairs. What red chairs?
You've got two chairs in the background that look like they've come out of some. I don't really know. I don't want to say what because it would probably sound a bit rude. Tom,
Maybe they're photoshopped.
Oh, are they photoshopped?
No,
in?
they're not.
Oh my goodness.
I got them from a parishioner's who's moving house, and he sold them to me. They're quite new, and sold them to me for virtually nothing. And I've wanted some extra chairs in my office for a while, so I can have meetings in here if there's only two of us. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, they look very, very comfortable, Tom.
They're not bad at all. They're not bad at all.
Yeah, they look good. They look good. So anyone who comes to a pastoral meeting can be assured of a warm welcome. We've got Daniel French as well with us. Daniel is having camera trouble for those of us who are joining on video today. So sorry about that. He might emerge, but at the moment we've just got a nice picture of his face.
Outside 10 Downing Street, actually, I think.
Oh, outside 10 Downing Street. Well, so that's good, isn't it? I mean, that's almost as good as having you with us, visually, Daniel. But Daniel, how are things with you at the moment?
I'm fine, thanks. A month into sabbatical, so all going well.
Nice. You having a good time?
Very, very much so.
Yes.
Much needed rest. So it's been great. Time flies by. Actually, it's surprising when you get sort of 3 and a bit months and you realise, whoosh, and we're already into the second month. So all quiet in Salcombe. This is a nice quiet time. As there's very few tourists, we've very much got the town to ourselves.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I'm pleased to hear it. So today, chaps, and for our audience, we're going to be talking about lots of different things, but there's going to be a bit of a theme. We're going to be talking a bit about the World Cup. Now, if you don't like football, please don't switch off because there are many, many salient and important cultural issues that the World Cup brings up. And of course, it's not going to all be about the World Cup. There are all sorts of things we're going to talk about, but there's been controversy over the Church of England saying that people shouldn't plan carol services at the same time as the World Cup final. There is, of course, this fallout over Armband Gate, which apparently seems to be the most important thing that's going on in the whole world at the moment, whether or not the captains of the European countries wear rainbow armbands. We've got a couple of good twits on Twitter this week. We've got lots of interesting questions for Question the Rev, and of course, your emails of the week. So stay tuned for all of this because it's all coming up. Does anyone have any notices before we delve into our scripture reading? Tom, How about you?
No, not really. I guess I've got one. The normal Thursday circle that I do, we're not meeting this week because I'm chaplaining at a licensing over in Hayward Heath. So do not, if you were thinking, I might just pop down to the Rose and Crown in Burwash. Don't come. Actually, it's a lovely pub, so you'll have a lovely time. But
it'd be sad though. It'd be sad for them, wouldn't it, to turn up and you weren't just not there. Yeah. And it wouldn't reflect well on you either, would it, Tom?
No.
As a person of integrity, as a person who wants to be who desires to be known as reliable, that wouldn't be good. Cool. All right. Well, we're going to do our scripture reading, which is the way we start all our episodes. And today we're going to be reading from the book of Revelation again. Still not going back to our our series in the Sermon on the Mount. Because we're reading through the book of Revelation at the moment in the lectionary of the Church of England, and I thought that the 13th chapter of the book of Revelation was a particularly interesting chapter, and I want to make a couple of comments about it. So that's what we're going to do. Shall we start? Shall we start with the Lord's Prayer?
Yeah,
we do that. Do you want to do it, Tom, this week?
No.
Can you? You can't.
No, I just can't. I've got a block.
Okay, Daniel, are you with us, or are you?
Oh,
just for Irreverend, I can do it in services, but for some reason, the moment I start doing it on Irreverend, I get the words. It's Jamie. It's Jamie's face.
Yeah, it probably is. All right, I'll do it today, and Tom, maybe you can try and learn it for next week.
That's your homework. Don't get it wrong, Jamie. Just don't get it wrong.
Somewhere I've got one of those Ladybird books on the list.
I just stick it on my monitor.
Yeah.
Can you remember it in the contemporary version? Maybe you'd find that easier.
I can do it. I could do it, Jamie. I could do it. I'll be
Go on then. You do it now. You do it now. Go on.
All right, let's pray. Let's pray them. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so the book of Revelation, chapter 13. Now this chapter is about, it's the writer of Revelation, John, sees this beast rising out of the sea, and then he sees another beast which rises out of the earth. Then that beast makes an image of the first beast, which comes alive, and people start worshiping it. It's all kind of, it's all very exciting stuff. I'm just going to read the first 10 verses of this because I don't want to read the whole thing, but just to give you that context. It goes like this. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it, the dragon, that's an image from just slightly earlier on. To it, the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? And who can fight against it?" And the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words. And it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. An authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive to captivity, he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he must be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. So in this whole chapter, it continues with the second beast as well, but essentially you can see what these beasts do. They blaspheme God, great authority is given them, they mislead the whole earth, they're haughty, they make war on the saints, they're worshipped by the people of the earth. And at the end of the bit that I just read, it just says, here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. And that's repeated. That's a repeated theme in the book of Revelation. Verse 18 of chapter 13 talks about the way that wisdom is needed by the saints to understand these things, to have spiritual discernment. Again, in chapter 14, I think it is the same. I think it's in chapter 14, the same admonition is repeated here. Oh, here it is, chapter 14, verse 12. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And rather than say much more about it, I just wanted to read a passage from a commentary by the now deceased Bible teacher, David Pawson. Now, I know people interpret the book of Revelation differently, but David Pawson most certainly thought that this passage and similar passages in Revelation were talking about a great tribulation that the church would pass through at the end of time. And in this passage, he's addressing the question of how this is relevant to us who are not necessarily passing through that great tribulation right at the moment. So I'm just going to read this and let David Pawson speak to this passage. The second concerns the fulfillment of predictions. If the big trouble, that's his phrase for the Great Tribulation. If the big trouble only covers the last few years, it may be that we shall not have to face it in our lifetime. So could it be a waste of time for all but the last generation of saints to prepare for it? One answer is that the current trend and speed of world events makes it an increasing possibility in the near future. But the main response to this kind of thinking must be the reminder that future events cast their shadows before them. And then he quotes from 1 John 2:18. Dear children, this is the last hour, and you have heard that the Antichrist is coming. Even now, many Antichrists have come. The false prophet is coming, but even now, many false prophets have come. And there he references Matthew 24:11, Acts 13:6, and Revelation 2:20. He goes on, in other words, what will one day be experienced by the whole church on a universal scale, i.e. hated by all nations, as Christ says in Matthew 24:9. This is already happening in local and regional settings. Any Christian can go through much tribulation before all go through the Great Tribulation. We must all be ready for the kinds of troubles that reach a climax then, but can come now. And beyond all this lies the return of the Lord Jesus Christ, for which every believer needs to be ready. The main motive for preparing to be faithful under pressure is to be able to face him without shame. I'll finish it there, but I think that's quite a nice commentary on what John is talking about in this book. He's talking about a time when this is David Pawson's interpretation. I know people differ on this, but he's talking about a time when the whole church will go through this period of great tribulation. But nevertheless, as he says, that these events cast their shadows before them in history. And one further thing, my wife actually got a thing through from Open Doors this week about persecution of Christians and how it relates to the World Cup and the various nations that are involved in the World Cup. And several of the nations that are represented at the World Cup in Qatar are quite bad in terms of their persecution of Christians, particularly Qatar itself.
Yes, it is. Very true.
Yeah. Iran, Tunisia, Cameroon, Morocco, Saudi Arabia. In all of these countries, it's quite difficult to actually be a Christian. I'm just looking for it. I wanted to read a little bit about some of these countries. Oh yeah, here we are. So I'll just read a couple of these things. So Iran has a population of 84.3 million, and there are 800,000 Christians in Iran. In Iran, teaching the Bible, telling others about Christianity or praying to Jesus could lead to being arrested. More people are rejecting Islam and choosing to follow Jesus, but there are dangers. Authorities raid house churches and many leaders have been sent to prison. In Saudi Arabia, the population is 35.3 million and there are 1.2 million Christians. But Saudi Arabia is a deeply Muslim country and laws state that leaving Islam carries the death penalty. Although courts have not carried this out in recent years, the very small number who do choose Jesus tend to keep their faith hidden. In Qatar, there's a population. Qatar is a very small country on the Arabian Peninsula. They have a population of 2.8 million and there are 372,000 Christians, which is actually 13% of the population. The only churches allowed in Qatar are for foreigners. The small number of Qatari Christians are not allowed to go to those services or have their own church buildings. Most converts will keep their Christian faith a complete secret, as Qatar doesn't officially recognize conversion from Islam. And one more, in Cameroon, the population is 26.6 million, and there are 16.4 million Christians, which is 62% of the population. In Cameroon, there's been a civil war going on since 2017, which has preoccupied the government, meaning there is less security in the north of the country, where the extremist Islamic group Boko Haram is active. This is making Christians in the region more vulnerable to violent attack. And for anyone who knows anything about the group Boko Haram, they are a seriously dangerous and unpleasant organization, which causes complete havoc wherever it goes, and it particularly targets Christians. So, chaps, I just thought I'd share that. I felt, when I was reading this last night, I felt very moved to speak about our Christian brothers and sisters who are persecuted in these countries and other countries which aren't represented by teams in the World Cup.
By coincidence, Jamie, I looked at this afternoon the US state government report on Qatar International Religious Freedoms 2021, which is quite a shocking, it's about 10 pages, and comes up pretty much says what you've just said, but includes enormous anecdotal and stuff and data, and it's clear that there is a real suppression of religious freedoms there outside the 7 recognized Christian denominations, who can't even put up a notice outside their church to advertise services. Proselytization is illegal and deeply shunned. House groups, funny enough, the report here says that there are about 175 house group churches in Qatar itself, and they were the first to voluntarily come out of COVID restrictions.
Really,
the government had not given them permission, so bravo to them.
Yeah.
Funny that, isn't it?
Yeah. It absolutely is, and I think it's so important to highlight this, apart from anything else, because all of the coverage of the World Cup is just this absolute madness that we're, this sort of silliness, really. I mean, we'll cover it in a minute, but this sideshow around armbands and things like that, when we as Christians, I really would like to encourage people to consider the persecuted church in these countries, and to pray for them, and to as Christians, I just think we need to have our priorities right on this one, as interesting as it will be to talk about everything else that's coming up. We should definitely remember that these countries are not countries in which people can, I mean, not all of them, obviously, there are many European countries in the World Cup, but these sort of 8 or so countries where Christians are not free, and many of them are in danger of, losing their businesses, being imprisoned, forced marriages, and so on and so forth. So it's for terrorist groups like Boko Haram. So I just think that's really, really important.
And what's extraordinary about these brave souls is that they have learned that practice of suffering well. And I was thinking of Romans 5. I was reflecting on that this morning, and we often quote it without that reference to tribulation. People put it up in posters and quotes about patience, and suffering generating character and hope, but there's also that sense that Paul gets us to remember that we glory in our tribulation. We glory in our tribulation. Can you imagine that on many of our churches as our USP on the notice board? Come here, learn to suffer well, and we'll glory in our tribulations. We'll take it on the chin, we'll turn the other cheek, and we'll do so. We'll do so in solidarity with Christ, and I think that's a profound thing. We've got a very consumer-led version of Christianity in the West, and some of these Christians in Qatar, I suspect, are made of very hard metal.
And I'm sure that living in a country where you are persecuted, where you're not free to manifest your faith in public, I'm sure it does sort out the men from the boys, as it were, or the wheat from the chaff. But that's the message I think that I just wanted to put out, from the book of Revelation. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. I think as well, the other thing about this is it really brings home to me this theme that we've been talking about over the last few weeks about, what's our relationship with the world going to be like as Christians. And really in scripture, and if you look around the world, the sort of normative relationship is that as Christ says, you will be hated by all men for my name's sake. I just read that in our mass lectionary today in Matthew chapter 21. And a lot of the time it seems to me like in the church we're so sort of interested in courting the favor of the world, but why, when Christ himself tells us to expect to be hated for following him and being faithful to him. And really, if the world loves us and if the world approves of us and that we're not in any way sort of controversial and just completely sort of anodyne and acceptable to the world, I would suggest that something's gone wrong.
Well, yeah, this is the problem with some of the debates around what the church should be doing now, isn't it? The Bishop of Oxford's pamphlet basically just says his hermeneutic, as far as I can tell, his way of interpreting the scripture is that the world has got it right and the church has got it wrong.
Yeah.
and I mean, that can be, in some ways, which of course is not what you would expect to be said by a Orthodox Christian bishop. It's quite
Yeah.
It wouldn't be said by an Orthodox Christian bishop, which tells us something about this particular one. But Jamie, the church is going to be set against the world. I mean, I don't sort of thinking through all these things. I don't really agree with the idea of a tribulation. I think probably as a sort of as a good amillennialist and partial it's always nice when you put yourself in a box, isn't it? I discovered I was in a box the other day when I was doing some reading around Matthew 24, actually. Matthew 24, yeah. And that passage, which is Sunday's sermon material. And I personally believe that a lot of revelation, a lot of the apocalyptic stuff in the Gospels has been partially happened already to the early church, and that we're
partially fulfilled,
which I think makes more sense of certain bits of it anyway. So I mean, I'd be happier to read this not as a sort of as a tribulation of the early church, which certainly did happen, and the beasts are often political, disguised political entities, Roman Empire or the Greek Empire. But in any case, the idea that the suffering, that we should embrace suffering is deeply countercultural, isn't it? It's completely against what the argument around assisted suicide, which is all about suffering is bad. Therefore, we should just be able to put ourselves out of the suffering. Whereas we want to be able to say, no, suffering in some way brings us closer to our Messiah and Savior. Because we enter into what he entered into, and therefore brings us closer to God in some mystical way. But the moment the transcendent is stripped out of society, of course, suffering has to be bad. You can't really learn much from it. It's quite unpleasant, rather not. Yeah,
totally agree. So I guess with that, just to comment on the hermeneutical issue, so the issue of how to interpret, David Pawson says this thing about, does he say, is it events cast their shadows before them? I suppose if you have a kind of amillennial, post-millennial, partial preterist view, or whatever it is, as in you think that these events were fulfilled in, say, the first century, you could say that events cast their shadows after them as well, couldn't you? And that these things are still relevant today.
You can talk in terms of types, can't you? Because I think they, I think that's reasonable. Like, you see things come again and again and again. It could even be that these things don't refer to one single event, but to a type of event that has happened and will happen and probably is happening.
I suppose the question that listeners will have is, do those events stack up? Is history going on the up and up or the down and down? And I know we talked about that before. So I suppose where I'd put my money is to say that I believe that these tribulations stack up because as we attempt to create these sort of man-made utopias, be masters of the universe without God, each time our versions of that create tribulations which are more complex and more beastly than the previous, So instead of progressing towards God, we move further and further away from his original design for us.
I'm sort of agnostic as to what I think at the moment, whether things are about to go really, really, really well or really, really, really badly. So I'll just sit in the middle. I should say I misquoted earlier. I meant to quote Luke 21, verse 17. You'll be hated by all because of my name. I think there is a similar verse in the Gospel of Matthew as well, in chapter 10, but I misquoted earlier. So just if anyone's wondering where it says that, Luke chapter 21 verse 17. Chaps, I think this is such a fascinating conversation about the Book of Revelation. I've really enjoyed reading through it in morning prayer and thinking it through. Let's turn from this serious and important conversation to another conversation which might be in some ways important, but in some ways is just utterly silly. And that's the well, we all know it's the World Cup is happening at the moment.
I must admit, Jamie, do you know what? I didn't know until last week.
You didn't know? Well, it wasn't happening last week.
Because I assumed that it would be over, and I hadn't really noticed, because that's what happened with the last one in the spring. And I was very surprised to discover that it's actually happening.
Yeah.
So that surprised me. But you know what? It seems to be the Church of England was surprised as well. Because do you know what? The weirdest thing about this advice they've given, we're talking about this advice, aren't we? Is that it came out like last week, and you're thinking it would have been really useful for them to have told me when the World Cup final was, when I was planning these services and putting them in the diary, which I can tell you was not last week. It was September.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's catch up our listeners here. So the Church of England have issued some guidance asking people, well, sort of advising people not to schedule their carol services at the same time of the World Cup final. The World Cup final is on the 18th of December, Sunday the 18th of December at 3:00. And as you rightly say, Tom, we don't schedule our services for Christmas 4 weeks before they happen.
Scheduled
months in advance.
I turned to my director of music and go, do you fancy having a 9 lessons and carols next week? How about we move it? No.
It's not next week, is it? It's a
Right,
bit of exaggeration, but it's too close to the time.
It's a big service. Unless you've got a professional choir, you've been preparing for it for some weeks. I mean, even if it's sensible, I know it probably is sensible. I mean, it's not ideal clashing with large sporting events. I mean, I guess you could sort of try and tease out some sort of spiritual thing about, the church should run its events, just regardless of whatever other things are happening, because it's more important than the World Cup. Of course, it is, but it's ideally one shouldn't clash if at all possible. But at this point, it's just far too late. I've got a 4:00 and a 6:00 service that day.
At least you'll catch the 6:00 crowd, they'll all sort of pile in, cans of Fosters in their hands. Not Union Jacks. It wouldn't be Union. It would be England flags sort of wrapped around their heads,
their torsos.
Their torsos, their bare torsos. It's good. But this has created a huge furore on Twitter, on Church of England Twitter. So I don't know, Daniel, whether you saw this, but there was a huge amount of criticism of the church.
I've gone off Twitter for a couple of days, so I haven't, but I did see the article in the Times and the Guardian.
Yeah, I mean, to my mind, this is all kind of overblown. This is one of the times when, all right, I'm not a massive fan of like the centralized church, bureaucracy and the proliferation of roles and all this kind of stuff that, produces this sort of thing. But the actual article itself on Church Support Hub, I just don't think is that bad.
It's got some stupid ideas, isn't it? Like the idea of screening it.
Well, I don't see why that's such a bad idea. It's basically saying don't schedule your carol services at the same time as the World Cup final. And in general, I just think that's not that bad advice. It's too late, but
it's 2 months too late.
It's not terrible advice, and I don't see it as some kind of like really carnal thing. I mean, I would not do that because firstly, I might want to watch the World Cup final. Now the jury's out on whether I will, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But so that's the first thing. But the second thing is like you want people to come to your carol service, and it's an opportunity for people from the community to come along. And if you schedule it at a time when they're doing something else, then they're less likely to come. I just think it's just sort of common sense. So I don't see, there's this whole outrage on Twitter about, the Church of England, you should get your priorities right, blah, blah, blah. And I just think, I just don't, this is an article on the Church Support Hub website. I just think it's a bit over the top. So I don't know, Tom. I just find it hard to be outraged by this. I can see you. Do you disagree with me?
No, I don't particularly. I'm fairly indifferent to the whole matter, really. Other than, I mean, you know, I just sort of thinking through December. I'm not sure where else I'd have put my carol service. Got other things and other weeks all over the place. But basically, the problem is the World Cup's at a stupid time. And
yeah, they were very inconsiderate, those Qataris. That Qatari regime.
About the needs of the parish. But the I guess no, screening it in the church or screening it as part of the service. They seem to imply.
Not screening it as part of the service. That'd be ridiculous. Doing it, screening it in a church hall, opening a church hall, screening the football, having Christmas refreshments. I don't see that. I see that as a perfectly decent idea. Obviously, you can't do that at the same time as your carol service, but I just think, you know, I just think it's over the. I just think on Twitter, I was looking at for some examples. I haven't got any up. I just think it's completely over the top. I don't see this as some kind of, you know, sort of carnal, attempt to curry the favour of the culture by the Church of England. The Church of England is often guilty of that, but this is not a case where I can fully agree. With what's being said. Are you looking? I'm
looking at this is the greatest of all time. Their nativity inspired by with footballing references,
and so that's referring presumably not to Cristiano Ronaldo, but to Jesus Christ.
Well, I hope so. I'm just checking through just in case. But they've used that "It's Coming Home" song. They've new words for it.
Oh dear.
We're coming west, we're coming west, we're coming, kings are coming west. And then you get it through again. He's coming soon, he's coming soon,
my goodness.
He's coming new.
Oh my goodness.
Jamie, tell us you really like it.
Actually. I love it. It's going to be in your church, Jamie. You're going to put this on.
You know, I don't want to be facetious about it, but there is a similar kind of theme there to the great Advent hymn, "O come, Emmanuel."
There we are. It's going to be there.
Now that I think about it,
all it needs is a bit of incense and some fussy robes, and JB's there. Anyway.
Now that I think about it, it's actually quite similar.
Chorus.
Yeah,
the rousing choruses.
It's actually quite similar. There's the themes about longing, waiting, expecting, hopes deferred. You know, all that kind.
Jamie, it's a narrative genius akin to the O antiphons. That's all I'm saying.
Indeed, the O antiphons. This is arguably not the most interesting part of this whole situation. I was going to move us on to the World Cup itself, Tom. But do you have any? Sorry, it sounded like you were going to make another comment.
No, I'm not. I can imagine why people are getting funny about it, and it is. I think the main thing is timed stupidly and impractical. I'm not gonna be able to put. I don't even have overhead projectors. Do you have an overhead projector? I don't have a television. I don't even have power in one of my churches at the moment.
Yeah, no, we've got a projector in our church hall. Yeah. I mean, it's not attached to anything. We could just get out of the cupboard. But anyway, it's just I just don't think doing stuff like that is that bad. I just maybe I'm full of newfangled ideas. I don't know, but I think trying to connect with people through what they're interested in is not that bad. I think for me, I mean, let's move on from this to talk about the actual thing itself, because I think that's the interesting thing here. For me, this is the strangest World Cup ever, and you know, people who listen to this know that I'm a big football fan. There's a number of things. Obviously, it's being held in winter rather than the summer because the Qataris essentially bought the World Cup from FIFA, and they've built, I think, something like 7 stadiums, and there's significant controversy over whether or not these stadiums were made by slave labor or by, you know, migrant workers who had very bad conditions, and some of them died and so on. So there's that whole controversy on the one hand. On the other hand, you've got this ridiculous situation where Western teams have wanted their captains to wear rainbow armbands because the virtue signaling is just completely it's out of control at this point. I mean, it really is. So they want to wear their Muslim armbands, their rainbow armbands, not their Muslim armbands, their rainbow armbands. But the problem is that homosexuality is criminalized in Qatar. And they were all going to do it, you know, talking about it, Virgil van Dijk and Harry Kane and everyone, they're going to wear their armbands. But then, do you know what happened next, Tom? FIFA said What were you going to say? Do you know what
I did hear. Yeah, they did. FIFA threatened them with yellow cards.
Yeah. So they don't. So Harry Kane would start with the yellow card. Virgil van Dijk would start with the yellow card if they did it. So they backed down and said they aren't going to wear the armbands because that's too high a price to pay for continuing their campaign for equality. As they would put it, for LGBTQ plus people. And so the latest development today, which I find, we're recording on Wednesday, which I find just to be so silly, is that the German team who were going to wear this armband for their team photo before they played and lost, by the way, to Japan, they have all covered their mouths with their right hands. And they tweeted out, the Germany team had tweeted out, it wasn't about making a political statement. Human rights are non-negotiable. That should be taken for granted, but it still isn't the case. That's why this message is so important to us. Denying us the armband is the same as denying us a voice. We stand by our position. And that's why they've got their hands over their mouths, because they've been denied a voice, Tom. They can't speak because they can't wear the armband.
I mean, given that they're so worried about this situation, I mean, surely they could have just worn the armbands and then got yellow cards, and then
no, it's not worth it. It'd actually have been a bit of a sacrifice on their behalf, wouldn't it? Well, Tom, have you ever played on a yellow card though? Well, if you're on a yellow card, you're always worried that you might get another booking, get sent off. It makes you feel slightly edgy, slightly anxious.
Yeah,
and it's too great a sacrifice.
Too great a sacrifice for the criminalized homosexual people in Qatari. It's quite interesting. I just want to delve a little bit into this because it's funny how relativism is king until it's not.
Yes.
So we're not supposed to be colonialists these days.
Yes.
But it's absolutely fine to be colonialist about certain things.
Yeah.
Like human rights, because I mean, human rights as a category is a funny one anyway. Where exactly are they rooted in? What are they rooted in? You have to root them somewhere, and the only place you can really root them is in the freedom given by God, I guess.
In Christianity.
But that means nothing in Qatar. Yeah. Or if it does mean something in Qatar, then it's absolutely fine to be politicizing and et cetera, et cetera. But it's just this sort of it's complete double standard. You shouldn't really be surprised by the hypocrisy. In fact, I saw this quite interesting article about hypocrisy, about how pointing out hypocrisy is pointless because all that hypocrisy is just a flagrant demonstration of power, and they're not actually interested in human rights. They're interested in the sort of liberal concept of humanity. Which where that matters, and they're then enforced anyway. They don't want, for example, the right to, be a sort of self-determinating country, which is another right. They're not interested in that. They're not interested in the right to practice your own religion where it disagrees with what they want. They're interested in simply using the power they have to enforce a sort of secular worldview upon everyone, because it's untethered.
Yeah,
I
think, Tom, it might even be more superficial than that. Is that they're just virtue signaling, and they are interested in the social capital it gives them to be taking the knee. And why are people still taking? Why are the England football team still taking the knee? Does anyone actually know what it means anymore? It's just become a totally meaningless gesture. I do agree with what you're saying, Tom. I think that the sort of underlying philosophy is there. The kind of secular liberalism or liberal secularism or whatever you want to call it.
Ed West wrote quite an interesting article about this, where he pointed out the last time the World Cup was held in a country where homosexuality was illegal was in fact 1966.
Right.
And I think 1966 World Cup was in England, was it not?
Yeah, it was when. Yeah, that's the whole "it's coming home" thing. Yeah, was homosexuality illegal at that point in England?
It was, yeah.
It was the late 60s, wasn't it, when it changed? Well, the last World Cup was in Russia, So look at the situation there for us now. But I mean, they weren't exactly our best friends back then.
Was that the one that was delayed? Is that why?
No. That was I get it mixed up. Yeah, Russia was 4 years ago, 2018, and the one that was delayed because of COVID was I forget where it was, but it was delayed. It was Euro 2020, but it was played in 2021. That's the one where we almost won. But
Is that why there's been so many football things?
What do you mean?
It's very annoying.
Do you mean in the last few years? Yeah, this one has actually been confusingly delayed, but it's actually closer to the last one because the last one was delayed by more, if you see what I mean. So you're right. But yeah, this I just think this whole thing is just utterly it's just become. This is why I say I'm like the jury's out on how much of this I'm actually going to watch, because I'm so sick to the teeth of this politicization of everything. It's hard actually to put the coverage on the BBC, because on the one hand you've got these presenters who are all out in Qatar actually, covering the football, being paid for it, but at the same time they won't stop talking about how corrupt Qatar is. And I just think, if you care about corruption in Qatar and you think it's wrong that the tournament is there, don't refuse to cover the tournament. Don't go out there and actually cover it and be paid for it and pretend that this is some kind of protest against the regime. It's just complete moral flaccidity and hypocrisy. I just can't see it any other way.
No.
It's just so, Tom, I know we've spoken about this before so many times, but it's just so annoying to have a sport you love ruined by this pathetic political virtue signaling, which has infected basically every single area of the game now. You can't watch a game without being subjected to it almost constantly. In the commentary, it happens as well. And, the thing that's so surprising about this whole thing is that it literally used to be completely against the rules, at least in England, to have any kind of political gestures whatsoever.
Presumably that's why they get a yellow card if FIFA was that's the rule they'd be transgressing. But I mean,
I'm not sure about that, because the England team took the knee the other day just before.
Yeah, but they're taking the knee, but the armbands is, because obviously taking the kney is so meaningless that they don't even get a yellow card for it. But the armbands apparently have so much meaning that they would be transgressing that rule. But they don't mean anything either, because it's an empty symbol, really.
Well, they wore, instead of the rainbow armband, they wore a no discrimination armband, which apparently is just as good. Maybe
it's meaningless.
I know it literally doesn't mean anything, does it? That's no discrimination. I mean, yeah, Tom, it's so annoying. Have you heard, Tom? Have you heard about Gianni Infantino, who is the head of FIFA? So he took over from Sepp Blatter, who was sort of notoriously corrupt, and he apparently did a 56-minute monologue at just before the World Cup started, basically kind of saying he was fed up with all the criticism of Qatar, and that he thinks that people should stop doing it, etc. And the weirdest part of it was this, and I think either this or the next one can count as.
Yeah, I think I know what you're going to say, Jamie. I thought
let's listen.
Talking for a moment, just before we do, talking of corruption, I just think they should just formalise it. They should just. I mean, they may as well just say, whichever country pays us the most gets the World Cup. They may as well do it like that.
I mean, it wouldn't, to my mind, that wouldn't even be the fact that it's sort of secret and underhand is the thing that makes it corrupt, isn't it? If people just paid to have the World Cup, it just seems to me like a straightforward business transaction.
Straightforward bidding, yeah. Anyway,
So anyway, the Qataris obviously are upset with all the criticism. So this is what Gianni Infantino, part of what he said anyway. See what you think of this.
I have very strong feelings.
Today I have very strong feelings.
Today I feel Qatari.
He's not Qatari.
Let's stop there. Okay.
He's not a Qatari. Yeah.
You don't even need to say the pause in this, because his pauses are so long.
That's like Gary Lineker saying that he's black, isn't it?
Today I feel Qatari.
He's Swiss. He's a Swiss. He's a Swiss white man. He looks like a slightly younger version of Klaus Schwab, I think.
Okay.
He's a bald man. Anyway,
right.
Carry on.
So he feels Qatari in what way? We need to hear. We need to hear, Jamie. I just need to know. I need the context here.
To be honest, Tom, he's not going to elaborate on how these things fit together. But let's continue. Let's continue. Are we still? Yeah, here we are. So we'll just carry on.
Today I feel Arab.
Arab.
No.
They fit.
Today I feel African.
Not so much.
A slightly different continent.
Today I feel gay.
He sort of looks like he I know people can't see this because we're just responding, but he sort of like does a sort of raise of the eyebrows, like, oh, this is the moment when this has just turned a bit fruity. Today I feel gay. And let's carry on.
It's quite a forum to come out on, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it is. Oh man, I'm gonna wind it back a bit because I don't want to miss any of this.
I think this should be the Irreverend opening, actually, Jamie.
You think we should play this over the theme every week?
Yeah, sorry, Carbon Mike, but
today I feel African. All right, here we go. Let's carry on and see what he has to say.
Today I feel gay.
Oh, we've already done that one.
Today I feel disabled.
Disabled.
This is getting awesome. Awful.
Today I feel a migrant worker.
So just to summarize, he feels like a Qatari, Arab, African, gay, disabled migrant worker. And this is, I just don't know what this is supposed to mean.
It's a sort of weird.
He thought of ordination in the Church of England.
Be a bishop tomorrow.
He would be in. He would be in.
He'd be definitely in. Yeah.
He'd just have to mention it. I've just been thinking, I've been feeling that maybe I might be called to be a priest in the church. All right, off to training college with you. You tick all the boxes.
Yep, right, go on.
That's it. It's finished. It's over.
Is that it? That's it.
I don't have any more clips of it.
I have to go on a bit.
Show the clip where he said that for 3,000 years.
Oh, okay.
The 3,000 years one, which was a lot of us were trying to figure out why 3,000 years.
Okay.
What Moses ever done in that period, or David, or
It's a very weird. I mean, he's quite naive in a sense because that whole section it sort of deeply transgresses quite a lot of the progressive sort of creeds about who's allowed to feel what. I mean, you can't have white men going around feeling like people with less privilege.
Yeah,
that's awful.
I mean, presumably he's not gay, so he's also sort of feeling gay as well. And like he's disabled and a migrant worker. He's hardly a migrant worker, is he? What? Because he's Swiss and he's in Qatar. I don't think he's.
Presumably, he has a rather large salary.
Yeah, I presume he's trying to say that he empathizes with all of it. I don't know. It's sort of.
Why couldn't he just say I empathize with them?
I don't know.
The problem is like you can't. The point is that the migrant workers are being oppressed by the Qataris. So it's not, and so the narrative goes, are the gay people as well. So he's sort of saying, well, I feel like all of them. So maybe you can too. Do you see what I mean? It's just a sort of inconsistent position. Hey, look, I found a oh wait, there's an advert. I'll stop doing the. Oh gosh, you can see, you can tell that we're an amateurish podcast, can't you? And I've got a clip of the thing about colonialism, and we can listen to that. We can listen to that now. So here we go.
Extraordinary.
Yeah. So Infantino hitting out here at criticism of Western criticism of Qatar. So here we go. This is what he says. There's no sound at the moment, so I don't know why. Here we go.
Today I feel.
Oh, we've had all this. No, we don't want to hear that again.
I sort of do actually. It's good.
Today I feel a migrant worker.
Migrant worker.
Of course, I'm not Qatari, I'm not Arab, I'm not African.
Okay, so he knows that he's not these things.
Gay, I'm not disabled. I'm not really a migrant worker.
Well, I guess he's Swiss.
I feel like that because I know.
Sorry, Tom. What were you saying? Sorry.
I guess he's. I mean,
At least he knows that he's not these things really.
Oh, yeah, true.
Not
true.
really a migrant worker.
But he feels like them. He feels like them.
Not really a migrant worker.
I think it's in denial.
He may be in denial. All right. He's about to justify it. So let's carry on.
What it means to be discriminated.
He feels what it means to be
bullied as a foreigner in a foreign country, as a child at school. I was bullied because I had red hair and I had these red, how do you call them?
Freckles.
Sorry?
Freckles.
Freckles. You see, I don't even know the term.
I mean, let's just stop it there. I didn't know that he said this, and I'm very sorry that he was bullied at school. I mean, seriously, it's not nice to be bullied. So, and I didn't know he had red hair as well, because he's bald now. So, not there's anything wrong with having red hair, but I feel sorry for him that he said that happened. So, he's got my sympathy for sure. Let's carry on. I mean that. I'm being serious. I'm not joking. It's not good to be bullied. So I do accept that.
We are told many lessons from some Europeans, from the Western world. I'm European. Actually, I am European.
He is. He doesn't just feel like.
I feel European.
All right, there we are.
I think for what we Europeans have been doing in the last 3,000 years.
Hang on. Okay, right.
Around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons.
Okay, that's the end of the clip. So there you go.
So
the
3,000 years,
the civilization that brought democracy, cured thousands of diseases, created football, television, and so you know what I mean. Fought 2 world wars.
So apologize. But 3,000 years. I mean, what was he thinking? I mean, I guess we're still.
So presumably, he's talking about the entire Judeo-Christian era. Like this is we should be apologizing for this for the next 3,000 years. I mean, the problem with this argument is it sort of doesn't really take into account any of the good things that have happened in the West, as you say, Daniel. But it also doesn't take into account the fact that. It's not exactly like empires in the Middle East have been paragons of democratic virtue over the last 3,000 years, is it? I mean, it's has he heard of say the Babylonian Empire or the Assyrian Empire? Or
the Egyptian Empire,
or the Median, or the Persian, or the Macedonian empires. These were all pretty bad in many ways. I mean, they didn't have a very good track record on slave labor, for example. So I don't really know. I don't think this argument works. But sorry, Tom, what were you going to say?
It becomes incoherent because most of those 3,000 years until sort of 500 years ago were spent with Indo-European empires fighting other Indo-European empires. In the sort of.
Yeah.
I'm not quite. So 3,000 years is really, really weird unless you're going to sort of claim that. And again, is there any sort of cultural? So you've got such a wide divergence between, say, English, British, the Britons. Let's go right before all those categories. The Britons, the Briton tribes of sort of 1000 BC, which are included in there, alongside the Sumerian Empire. It makes, or the Egyptian Empire at that time, which was enslaving Numidians because they valued the color of their skin.
Yeah, it's clearly ridiculous. It's clearly ridiculous.
Nonsense.
It's a ridiculous historical argument, Tom. But is there a sort of grain of truth in it, which is that you do have these Europeans going over there who clearly disagree with the Qataris' Islamic, way of looking at things. Let's say their Islamic perspective, and they clearly think that their own perspective is superior. And so they're going over there and saying, well, this shouldn't be this way. And Qataris are saying, hang on a second, this is our religion, this is our culture, and it's our rules. And you're not allowed to just come over here and say, we want homosexuality to be legal because we Qataris don't care. That's not the way we see things.
Well, you're right. I've already touched on this. It's incoherent. There's incoherence in the corner, saying on the one hand that everything's relative and that we shouldn't be. I remember last week we talked about Welby's sort of bringing forward the indigenous peoples to talk about climate change. This idea that culturally important truths are relative, and that's that if one culture enforcing it on another is colonialist and evil. You can't then turn around and say, but we have access to greater truth than these dumb Qataris, and we should go over and tell them what to do.
Well, yeah, it's more extreme than that. It's that we're saying we've got access to a kind of objective truth, which is that everybody deserves human rights, and these people are objectively wrong. So on the one hand, we sort of promote a sort of cultural relativism, but on the other hand, we want to say that our culture is superior. But on the other hand, we also want to say that our culture has been historically imperialist and has done a huge amount of damage to indigenous and indigenous and non-Western cultures, let's say.
Yeah, it's completely incoherent.
Yeah, but
I'm happy enough.
Coherent without reference to the Christian faith, isn't it?
Right. But the moment you accept that there are truths that can be proclaimed, that some not really cultures have, but that some religions have, that should then be permitted to go out and change people's minds. You're in a completely different sort of set of epistemological ideas, aren't you? It's completely different grounding. They're so
what the Westerners who are going over there are meeting is a set religious view of the world. Like for Qataris, for Qatari Muslims, Islam is just the truth, and there's no negotiation. It's just that Islam is the true view of the world. And so it doesn't matter that you've got Western people going over there and saying, well, we think that homosexuality should be decriminalized and we're on this kind of upward progressive trajectory. The Qataris just don't, the Qatari Muslims just don't care. It's just a complete irrelevance. And I'm not saying that I think Christians should have exactly the same attitude, but there is a sense in liberal Christianity that Christians find it really hard. I think actually in other types of Christianity as well, that Christians find it really, really hard to think like that, to think that Christianity is true and it is objectively true, it is factually true, and therefore people who have worldviews which contradict it are wrong, they're mistaken in their views. And it's not a question of us trying to sort of rub along with worldviews which are different but sort of mutually valid and consistent. It's actually a question of the fact that some people are living with a false view of the world and some people are living with the true view of the world. I think as Christians we find it very, very difficult to think like that, but nevertheless that is the way let's put it this way, it is the implication of believing in a religion like Islam or Christianity. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes,
very much so.
So I don't know. It's all madness, isn't it? It's really what I think the way you can summarize this is by saying that what we're seeing is the breakdown of the rational order of the West. And I think the reason that we're seeing the breakdown of the rational order of the West is because we are increasingly untethered from our Christian moorings, which gave us that rationality in the first place. And so you've got this just complete sort of moral and intellectual incoherence now, which is very bizarrely manifesting itself at the 2022 Qatari World Cup. And that's the way I see it. I mean, it is silly, these Germans standing there with their hands over their mouths. I mean, they just look so pathetic, and you just think, like, what on earth is going on? But really, I think that you can see that this decline into foolishness and incoherence is simply ultimately the result of the abandonment of Christianity and the rationality that it has bequeathed to our cultures.
I suppose what it also demonstrates is that often it's the more fashionable causes that rise up to the front of concerns, and that what you end up is what you see in so much of even British charity culture, is that some charities do really well because they pull at the heartstrings and others don't. Yet that's in the end the only way that we judge it is by how noisy the gong is made. And as we began this podcast, we were thinking about the Qatari Christian communities who looks like they don't have any voice, any concern in the stadium.
Yeah.
Well, certainly the One Love badges are not going to be in favour of Christian, the sort of the hostility of the LGBT sort of culture to Christian witness, Orthodox Christian witness is palpable. It's there. They're not interested.
Yeah, well, and just they've got no interest in Christians who are persecuted in Qatar more generally, are they? So, should we do a bit of the old Question the Rev to finish off, chaps? Have you got?
Go on then.
Time?
Yeah,
we need our song, don't we? Oh no, hang on. Here we go. All right, this is it. Tom and Daniel, today I feel like a rev. Today I feel like being questioned. Today I feel like giving some coherent and concise answers. I hope you feel the same as we enter this period of Question the Rev. Now, I've put this out on Telegram. Just a reminder to everyone that you can join our Telegram group, t.me/Irreverend pod, or you can indeed go on our website, reverendpod.com, and just find the details about Telegram, all our social media, how to support the show, and everything else there. And I'm going to read out the questions I like and the ones which are concise. Okay, so here we go. Remember, this is more like quick fire. Yeah. So, JJ, I find it difficult to understand the King James Bible. Your pods help, but is there basically a Bible for dummies as an intro you could recommend?
RSV.
Right. Okay. Daniel?
Yeah, I'd say the same actually. And though the King James is difficult, and I appreciate what he's saying, in terms of the word breadth and vocabulary, it's surprisingly concise. There's actually very little. You just got to learn a few more words.
Yeah. Well, it's a very faithful representation of the Greek. We've sort of spoken about this several times before, isn't it? It's very down to the sentence structure at times, unless it completely makes no sense in English. But I mean, I think the RSV does smooth it out a little bit, make it a bit easier to read, but without any of the woke editions of, say, the latest editions of the NRSV or the latest editions of the NIV. So I think RSV is a reasonable shout.
I think another translation I would recommend is the English Standard Version. I think the superior situation with the English Standard Version is that it is widely available, which the RSV is not so much anymore because it's been superseded by the NRSV, which, as you rightly say, Tom, has allowed political concerns, in my opinion, to supervene on its actual translation philosophy, so that it gives you an inaccurate rendering of terms which are to do with, essentially, to do with men and women. So in my mind, this is a serious problem with the NRSV translation. The RSV is undoubtedly much better, and I use that personally. And I also use the ESV, the English Standard Version, which is a good modern-day English translation. Somebody's also on Telegram itself recommended The Message, which is it's a sort of very, very loose translation or paraphrase by Eugene Peterson, and I think it's perfectly fine, just as long as you bear in mind it's not really a translation of the original languages, but a kind of as I say, a paraphrase really of what Eugene Peterson thinks that the original Bible says. And so I'd use that alongside another translation.
Of course, even better than all of those, learn Greek.
Yeah,
I agree.
potentially
I agree.
not the most helpful advice. I thought you were going to say you could get David Bentley Hart's.
No, don't get
translation.
David Bentley Hart's translation. That's awful. But let's learn Greek.
It's not awful. Why are you saying that? It's fine.
Jeremy Duff, New Testament Greek is a good place to start. And if you've got some time, it's fun. And then you can go and delve into the original scriptures of the New Testament yourself, and the whole world be opened up to you.
And you can go on a holiday in Greece and sound like a Shakespearean.
Yeah, you can learn. You can learn several words which may be useful to you in modern day Greece, but on the other hand, may not be, because they might not exist anymore.
I had a friend who did this and tried New Testament Greek while on holiday, and so bar staff were just like completely buckled up with laughter. He said, "Verily I saith unto thee, I wish to procure 3 beers."
Well, it's quite impressive that he got to that stage of being able to do that. Right. Okay, we need to move on. Emily, good afternoon. Are the Revs concerned at the numbers of ex/current NHS people joining the clergy as non-stipendiary, in inverted commas, preachers? That's her question. I hadn't noticed personally. I don't know whether you guys had
come across that many of them. There are some. I mean, Bishop of London's one, isn't she?
She was a nurse. Yeah.
She was a nurse, head nurse, manager. Do you know what? Yeah, there are some, but I'm far. They're not homogenous. There are actually a lot of people coming through the NHS who, especially slightly older, but a lot of sense.
Is Emily's question, is it driving towards some kind of conclusion, which is that the Church of England is increasingly sort of modelling itself on the NHS and actually, in some sense, wants to be a kind of non-medical version of the NHS, do you think?
I don't know. Or is it just that people coming at the NHS tend to be thoroughly sort of institutionalized, but so a clergy by the time you've done 3 years in college. I mean, a comment on that. If the Church of England does want to be a non-medical version of the NHS, I would suggest that it's taken the only valuable part of the NHS away and just retained everything that's terrible about the NHS. It's probably not a very good idea. No, bad idea. Go on.
There is, there's a noble tradition of what they call parish nursing.
Yeah,
but that's a completely different thing in terms of that's more of a lay post where people who've worked as registered nurses in retirement become specialist pastoral workers and home visitors, and there's a whole sort of society for them. It used to be, didn't it, that it was mainly. It used to be teachers and lawyers who tended to become priests. And it could well be that the case that as we become more institutional, that you can see how people from these big institutions could say, well, that's a nice fit to segue over to the Church of England. I think my concern is that in the cohort of ordinands, I rarely see artists, serious artists, serious musicians, who've done this as a career, who can provide that particular aesthetic insight that we often miss.
Yeah. You're a musician, aren't you, Tom? You did it for career. You did it for career, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. Although I'm also quite Puritan, so I'm very divided about the aesthetics in worship.
Yeah, you're confused. Right, let's move on. Kevin, do you think the government, this is a good question, do you think the government of a country should be religiously agnostic, i.e. UK? Now I'd question that there, but carrying on here. If yes, then where does it draw its moral code from? If no, then what religion should it be aligned with? It seems the only political party currently promoting and advocating for Christian values in the UK is the Heritage Party. All other parties are either drifting towards a form of totalitarianism, flawed ideology, or liberalism. Thoughts?
Well, yes, I do think there should be religious I think that there's no realm that is not under the authority of God. In fact, the very concept of a kingdom has to be religious. If you take away the God out of the monarchy, we'd end up in a spiritual republic, and eventually, quite swiftly, I suspect, in an actual republic. Because where is the moral legitimacy of the king if not from God? So yeah, I think we should be aiming at Christian governance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would say that countries are always religiously governed, if you can put it like that. There's always a kind of religious ideology that underpins a political arrangement. So our I don't really think our arrangement is even secular, technically speaking, because we have an established church. But even if we did, there would still be sort of religious presuppositions that undergird it. And you can see that every time anyone gestures towards any kind of morality or objective authority for law or human rights or anything like these are always sort of metaphysical propositions. And
you can see that in the American Declaration, can't you?
Yeah.
The supposed secular society, as some would interpret it today, has that presupposition. It's in God we trust.
Yeah,
these rights are inalienable.
Yeah,
because they are a divine gift.
Yeah, how does the Declaration of Independence start? It starts by saying that we take it as a self-evident truth that all men are created equal, and that's a metaphysical proposition. It's a religious proposition. It's not something that you can find out empirically by looking around at the world. It's something that's already out there. So when our friend Kevin says if a country could be religiously agnostic, where does it draw its moral code from? That's the central question, isn't it? And that's what we're seeing today with this incoherence around us. Is that it actually reminds me of Alistair McIntyre's book After Virtue, which we've spoken about before. He talks about this at the beginning of this book. It's like when you get rid of Christianity and the Christian tradition. I mean, he's also talking about the Aristotelian tradition in that book as well. But essentially what you're doing is you're kind of piecing your morality together from all these different sources, some Christianity, some Aristotelianism, some Stoicism, some other sources from different places. And you're not actually aware that that's what you're doing, but that is what you're doing. And that's what we're seeing in our culture today. We're seeing a kind of, a post-Christian bricolage of different values, which is sort of all jumbled together, and sometimes they fit together and sometimes they're totally incoherent, and that's the reason why. So question about the political party, the Heritage Party, is that the one that's is that David Curtin's party?
I've no idea. There are Christian parties though, aren't there? There are
such as,
I don't know, usually there's some sort of Christian standing at most general elections I've voted in.
I listened to Peter Whittle's podcast yesterday, where he had Peter Hitchens, who was arguing for the creation of a Gaullist party, which had a clear Christian slant to it. Yeah,
absolutely. And Hitchens is very, very clear and consistent on this. I think it's important to say that in sort of saying that it should be a Christian nation, there's a lot of kind of thought that would need to go into what that actually means. It's by no means clear, how you would legislate for being a Christian nation. But I think one of the things that a Christian nation would do is it would be clearly based in the Judeo-Christian heritage, in the Bible, in our country, in the Anglican formulary, such as the Book of Common Prayer. But it would still be a society in which there could be toleration of difference and of minority positions. It would just be uncompromising about the fact that it was a Christian nation. So you could still have other people, other minorities living in the country, other religions and other, people who are not Christian or secularists, I suppose you'd say. But the point is that it would be a nation which is governed according to Christian principles, as a kind of overarching framework. So we're not talking about some kind of, oppressive totalitarian theocracy or anything like that. In many ways, I think what we're talking about as English people is simply a return to the situation as it was, say in the 19th century or something like that.
And we'll see that tension being lived out in the coronation.
Yes, indeed. We will. Which is when? When is that?
6th of May.
In early May, isn't it? Yeah.
Is it the 6th of May?
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
That's 2 days after our Roger Eyre event.
May, that's not.
Oh, no. No, our Roger Eyre event's in February.
February, yeah.
I don't know why I said that. It was wrong. The Roger Eyre event is on the 4th of February, not the 4th of May. That's crazy. That's totally wrong. Anyway, chaps, I need to go in a minute, so we'll make that the last question.
Yep.
Rev. Thank you for all those questions. They're really good, interesting questions, and we appreciate that. Just to say, you can email the show with any feedback at all, good or bad or indifferent, although why you'd email about your indifference is probably a bit mysterious, but you can do so at irreverendpod@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so on Patreon by making a regular donation to the show, which we find really helpful. Or you can go on buymeacoffee.com/irreverend and leave a one-off donation there and leave us a little message, which we always enjoy. All of those things are on our website, irreverendpod.com, along with our merch, where you can buy Irreverend mugs, Irreverend, the cool and brilliant Irreverend t-shirt, long sleeve black t-shirt, which is really, really cool, or baseball caps as well for those younger people in our audience, or older. You don't have to be young to wear a baseball cap, but all our merchandise is also on our website, irreverendpod.com, and everything else, all our episodes and everything are there as well. So just go there if you'd like to support us, buy merchandise, join our social media, follow us on Twitter, etc., etc., etc. It's all there. And thank you for all your support. Now we should finish with a prayer, as always. So Daniel, you're someone who does the occasional prayer. Can you?
Well, I thought we could end with the collect for last Sunday from the Book of Common Prayer, since it is Stir Up Sunday as well as Christ the King.
Exactly.
So let us pray. Stir up, we beseech thee, O Lord, the wills of thy faithful people, that they, plenteously bringing forth the fruit of good works, may of thee be plenteously rewarded through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Good collect. And you know what the next collect is? The first Sunday of Advent. That's a
cracker, isn't it? Yes.
Oh, it's one of the best collects, I think, ever. Best evs. We should do like a special where we do the 10 best evs collect.
Yeah, we would never agree, though, would we?
No, but that's what would make it so good, Tom. That's what would make it such an amazing episode. Imagine the ratings. Imagine the ratings, Tom. Imagine the downloads. Imagine the spike we'd get from that. It would eclipse Peter Hitchens by many, many times. Yes, no, that was the Peter Hitchens episode was very popular. So thank you, Peter. It's far better and far more popular than a podcast in which we squabble over the top 10 collection Book of Common Prayer. Although maybe he'd be up for coming on, and
I think he probably would, yeah,
doing that with us. Yeah. Well, we can only dream.
Right.
If anyone has got any ideas for specials along those lines, please do let us know. Irreverendpod, whatever it is, irreverendpod@gmail.com. Chaps. Okay. Well, thanks so much to you and to everyone else. And we look forward to being with you again soon. And so until then, it's goodbye from Daniel and Tom.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.